Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another Beazy podcast where we talk about the behind the scenes of the creative industry. I am Rafael, your host for today, and our guest is Rick Minnick. He is a documentary filmmaker here based in Berlin. He's our man in Berlin, and I say that not just to praise. He's actually like branded himself as this. You can check his website. And yeah, I've been a personal fan because first, Rick is a old member of the Beazy community. Has been with us for a long time, and it's really nice to see all the work he has done and follow, a bit of his journey. And yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think like the first thing I wanted to ask you is mainly how you got into filmmaker. Was this always a passion of yours, or it was like something that came along the way? How was it?
Well, when I was growing up, I thought I wanted to become a newspaper journalist, and all through high school, and I put out a little music fanzine back then because I was really into the music scene in Los Angeles in the 1980s. And then I got to college and started watching lots of movies, and I was in New York City and got to go to these art house cinemas after class, and I'd see a double feature for $5 or something, and I really fell in love with cinema, mostly European cinema, especially like the French New Wave films and the Italian neorealist films and stuff. And then I decided, oh, maybe I don't want to be a journalist after all. I want to become a filmmaker. So, I was like 20, 21, 22 at that time. And then I applied to a couple of film schools back then. They all turned me down. I'm very glad they turned me down because I think at that point I was just too young. I didn't really know what I wanted to tell stories about. And if you're going to go to film school, it's a huge commitment. These days it's extremely expensive. So unless you have come from a rich family, it's something you really have to think long and hard about if that's what you want to do, because there's really the film school path you can go down, and there are lots of other opportunities without film school. It really depends on the type of person you are, and if you're someone who learns well in a school environment and thrives, that might be the way for you to go. If you're someone who's really a DIY type and just likes to, you can learn from watching YouTube videos and stuff, then maybe that's a better path for you.
Nice. That's very interesting to hear because when I was also doing the research on your previous films and everything, I see that you're also an educator, right? You teach filmmaking also in film schools. So it's interesting to see that like this is not also the only way, even though like you're kind of involved on this film school kind of world. And I wanted to ask how did that came about? You always wanted to teach? It was something that like it was something, oh, I'm gonna make some extra cash, and then you ended up liking. How did it came about, this whole teaching?
Kind of by accident, actually. Let's see, this was maybe 10, 12 years ago. I got asked to teach at a film workshop in Romania. It's an international film workshop for documentary. And it was a former classmate of mine from film school who's from Romania, and she and her partner, who's from Georgia, they organized it together. And they were just looking for tutors from different countries to come. And I think we bumped into each other at a film festival in Warsaw like a few months earlier, and then got back in touch with each other. And then she asked me if I could do this. And I didn't really have much of a clue what I was doing. It was just that there were projects, documentary projects. It was all filmmakers from the Black Sea region. So a lot of them from former Soviet republics and Romania, Bulgaria, all along the Black Sea, and Turkey. So it was an interesting group of people. And they all had documentary projects that they were developing. They were trying to figure out what the story is and how to tell the story, how to get money to make it and stuff. So they brought in people who were working in the industry from different countries and stuff, and producers and directors and writers and stuff to kind of help them out. So basically I was just asked to read these projects and talk to people and give them advice. And it was pretty natural because it was just basically what I do all the time, and helping, making films. And that kind of one thing kind of led to the next. I saw that the Met Film School in Berlin had just opened up, and this is 2012. And there's an article in Ex-Berliner magazine that I read about it, the English language magazine here. And I was like, that's interesting. I never heard about it. So I looked up the website of the school and sent them an email. And then the director of the school wrote me back like the next day or something, said, hey, well, you want to come by and have a chat? And so I was there and suddenly in her office, and we'd been talking for a while. And, after an hour or so, she's like, well, would you like to teach class next month? And I'm like,
Wow, sure.
okay,
Next month.
okay. And then it was the BA students, and they had a section, a module that was documentary. They did mostly fiction stuff, but they had a section that was documentary. And then it was quite flexible what I did. So we talked about different ideas, and then she kind of gave me a chance to do it, and I enjoyed it. And then that kind of led to being asked to teach over and over again there.
Yeah, nice. That's interesting. Yeah. And yeah, you're saying that like, okay, I came to Berlin, Romania. You're talking about your passion for like European films, and yeah, I wanted to ask you like, why did you choose Berlin? That now like in your website and everything's like our man in Berlin, and how this American man came to Berlin and made Berlin his home.
I think Berlin chose me. I had the chance to spend a semester abroad in Vienna in the spring of 1989, and we didn't know back then that the world was about to change. This was just a few months before the Berlin Wall came down, and I got to travel around a lot in Eastern Europe, and I went to the Soviet Union, and I went to Berlin, and I also went to East Berlin. From West Berlin, I did the one-day visa thing coming to East Berlin in the summer of '89, and there was no idea that the wall was about to come down a few months later. And I just really liked Berlin. And I was here with a buddy of mine, and this was like a year or two after the Wim Wenders film came out. Wings of Desire is the English title, but Der Himmel über Berlin. So we were looking for all the locations from the film. We were trying to find all these places. It was kind of, and it's just in trying to find all these locations, we just saw a lot of the city. And I was like, when I graduate, I want to move back here. So I went back to New York and finished my studies. And while I was in New York, the wall came down, and then I decided I really want to go to Berlin. And then after I graduated, I moved here.
Was the breaking point, no pun intended.
Yeah, the breaking point, yeah.
Like, now I gotta move to Berlin.
But basically, I was in New York, and after I'd had this European experience, I just kind of wanted to go back to Europe. So I didn't really try to get a job in New York or anything, and I applied to a couple film schools then and got turned down. And then actually I had my bachelor's degree is in English, so I thought, okay, maybe I can teach English. And that's really how I got started here. I mean, first I was washing dishes in a Greek restaurant as an illegal immigrant, and then I got an offer to teach English at a language school, and they helped me get a visa, so I became a legal resident of Berlin. And then at some point I started going to film school here.
Yeah, nice, interesting. Like, and that's ties with the next question I had for you. It's about like, as you said in the beginning, I was doing like dishes and everything, and this is often the case with film students that want to make into the film industry, that they have to do other jobs, or even like, I don't know if you always know, like, I guess coming from journalism is something that it's kind of related more to documentary, when you're like exploring other people's story and telling a story that is not like completely created. But sometimes along the way, especially in the beginning, you have to fund your projects, your stuff, with not really just being in film, right? And I even like was seeing your portfolio back then, and I saw that you also did some commercial work. And this is one of the things that people do in the beginning, like they just start doing commercial work because they know there is money there, until they hone in their skills, and then they can go in the path they are more like passionate about. And how I'm interested to listen, like, how was it in the beginning for you? Like, were you like doing all this stuff, like, okay, I'm gonna do commercial to fund my films later, and how was it like the journey from washing dishes to just pay school for like, okay, now I can fund my own films and so on?
I haven't done a whole lot of commercial work. That kind of came a little later. What really happened is, I have to kind of remember at this time that we're talking about the early 1990s, there was no really good video format. There was like high-end video that the TV stations used, and then there was VHS, which was like these big VHS tapes that were really bad.
Yeah.
So like 16 millimeter and Super 8 millimeter were really the only thing we had. And so I started making these 16 millimeter films, and it was really expensive to buy the film stock and to process them at the lab. So I was teaching English, and at some point started getting jobs as a translator, translating German texts into English. And that's how I financed my first films, some short films I made on 16 millimeter. And the film, I just had to talk to the film labs. In some cases, I was working with film students from the film school here, and some of them had extra film from other productions. So usually I didn't have to buy the film, but I had to pay for all the processing at the labs. And I would talk to the labs, and I was like, I can't pay you everything right away, but they would let me pay over, like, make monthly payments. So I just remember it might take me 6 months to pay all the bills and stuff, but it worked somehow. And then I teamed up with I got to know some film students, and we were kind of able to use some equipment from the school. And back then there weren't very many of us Americans here, so I was still kind of exotic, and people were wondering what I was doing here, and were generally quite helpful. So that happened. And I had this experience with my first short film, Delphi 1830. It's this 3-minute experimental film I shot on 16 millimeter with a wind-up Bolex camera. You hand wind it. I shot it one frame at a time.
Wow.
And then I teamed up with one of my classmates who was doing sound, Robert Henke, who's become quite a famous musician these days, and electronic musician. Mono Lake, he has this group, Mono Lake, and he did sound for it. So it's just the two of us who made this film. And then the film school started. I had a connection to the film school, and they helped me like start submitting to film festivals, and it started playing at all these festivals. And I remember I got invited to go to London to show it at a film festival, and they put us up in a nice hotel and stuff. And I was like, wow, this is kind of fun. This is, and then it was playing in Australia and in South America and all over the U.S. and Europe. And I'm like, wow, it's just this little 3-minute film, and it kind of encouraged me to make another one. And then I made sort of an improvised, sort of pseudo-fictional film on the streets of Berlin. And it's a sort of the old almost journalist part of me kind of wanted to deal with like all the changes. I wanted to show something about all the change, how the city was changing dramatically in the early 90s. But I wanted to have sort of a fictional story that I had a little bit of control over. So I had these 3 guys. One was a professional actor, and the other 2 they're all old school friends. And they kind of improvised the dialogue, but we had what was going to happen, I already planned out. And we got to those locations. We were filming without any shooting permits, totally illegally, doing everything in the night. And we just made this short film called Next Time Everything Will Be Better. It's about these 3 anarchists who are blowing things up in Berlin. Kind of. We had, fake dynamite and stuff. And yeah, so it just, one film always led to the next. That played at some film festivals, and then I started making another film, and I've had a couple of lucky breaks, not huge things, but I had one was that when I got accepted into film school here, my second time around, they took me. I had this idea that I wanted to go back to California, where I'm from, for my 10-year high school class reunion. And I was like, I want to make a film. Basically, I wanted to go to my reunion, and I didn't have the money to do it. And I was like, why don't I make a film about it? Like, and some guys that I liked back then and some that I didn't like. And then the local TV station would like the idea. So they got involved, and then my school, and then there was suddenly money to do it. And I was going back to my hometown in California with a camera student and a sound student and me, and 6 hours of 16 millimeter film material. And we were supposed to make a 45-minute film for German TV. And it turned out to be a feature-length film, and it's 73 minutes. And the TV station's like, yeah, we'll show it. We're not going to pay you any extra money, but we're going to show it. And then that kind of opened a new door to me, that suddenly I had a TV station involved, a German public TV station. And that film played, Good Guys and Bad Guys played at some film festivals. And that kind of, one story always led to the next,
Yeah, that's really interesting, and this was another question that I had, like related to Isimov, like your latest film. the Straight Guys. We were like in the premiere. Love the film, by the way. If you guys,
Thanks.
if you guys have the opportunity, go check it out. But in that film and in other films that I've seen that we've done, you kind of travel a lot. So you kind of have to pack light and lean, or as you were saying, like it's just me and two other people. And because the difference I see that many times in documentary filmmaking and traditional, like more narrative filmmaking, is the crew. Like even like music videos, you have like many lights, and then you have like 3 people for light department, grip and everything, and you have hundreds of people in film. And when you go to documentary, like many times it's like almost a one-man band kind of thing, right? Like how is it with you? Do you have people that you work usually with, like often? You're almost this one-man band, and how much, like equipment you bring? Because many people are like, oh no, I have to cover everything, so I need like 5 different lenses, 2 cameras, and I have this light. But like you can't really have it when you're always on the go and you're always on the move, because you're carrying your own gear, so you want to make it light so it doesn't. Yeah, it's a burden on yourself. How is this process of like the crew and production in a documentary filmmaking kind of world?
It's every film is different, but there's sort of an old saying that the best camera is the one that's in your pocket, or kind of whatever you have. So I'm not someone who gets obsessed with having like the fanciest new camera. It just doesn't interest me that much. I'm always trying to find the tools that fit the project I want to do and the type of situation I'll be in, whether I'm filming alone or with a crew, just so that if we're going to some, like with the Straight Guys, part of the trip, we knew that we would be taking a helicopter to this island in the Bering Strait, and there was a strict limit on how much we could take with us. So we had to really design our gear and our whole strategy for that shoot with how much could we take with us. And that also means like, what can you take to wear? And, your private things and stuff. And really we had to weigh everything and really think it through and try to keep it kind of minimum. I had a camera guy, a sound guy, and me, and then the 2 people are 2 characters that were traveling with us. So it's basically 5 of us. Sometimes I shoot on my own, but that's usually just when I'm starting a new project, when there's no money yet. So I have to start filming something, and then I cut together a teaser to start pitching to people and showing it around to try to get money. That's how it kind of works. And that's where I really think this digital technology is fantastic, because in some ways it's a great time to become a filmmaker or a media maker or whatever you want to call yourself, because you can start and you can actually produce something with very little money, and you don't need a whole lot of equipment. And with Beazy, you can just rent equipment from colleagues for really cheap, and make deals and stuff, and that's really great. I mean, I can start projects. I've had stuff that I've been pitching where I just had like some shots from my iPhone, because that's all I had with me when something happened, and that there are shots in the Straight Guys that were from my iPhone, because that's all I had with me at that particular moment when something happened. And these days you can kind of mix it all quite well. It was very different when I started. You had to really have some kind of a proposal that you pitched, and you kind of had to wait. You basically had to wait until someone gave you money, because it was so expensive to get started.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I was interested because like I've been doing like music videos, for example, and then I see like this RE 4.5 kilowatts, and then just the thing is like 30 kilos probably, and like it's not feasible in every new hour is on the go. And it's funny that you bring up this like, oh, I used to have to pitch and do all this stuff, because the kind of the next 2 questions kind of that I have is, one, how it's different now and back then. Like, how do you used to fund your films, and how do you fund your films now? Is it changed, or is kind of the same process? And another, I think, is kind of related, is how you find the stories. Because first, before you pitch anything, you have to get a story that you want to tell through the documentary film, right? And then how do you actually go and find these stories? It's just like you're journalists that you go and research, or how does it come about? How do you decide what the story you want to tell next?
The stories kind of come to me. over time it's become like that. Like, let's see, if we go back to that class reunion film, I wanted to go to this class reunion, so that led to that story. And then after I finished shooting that, I went and visited my mother, who at that time lived in a town called Branson, Missouri, which is kind of like a Christian Las Vegas in the middle of the U.S. And I was there once when I was a little kid, but I didn't remember much of it. And I went there and visited her and saw that the town had only about 4,000 people at the time, but it had all these big theaters, and they had more theater seats than Las Vegas and Broadway combined. And all these people who were stars, like when I was a little kid, like in the 70s and stuff, moved there and they built these big theaters, and the audiences came by the busload to them. Like a lot of older people, like people my parents' age, would come there by in bus tours and would see these people on stage. I thought, this is a really strange place. So then suddenly I was like, I want to make a film about this town. So that became my next film, which was actually my graduate thesis film from film school. And then while I was making that film, I met some people who are musicians in that area in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri, who were like modern day hillbillies, with the overalls and big bellies and big beards, and played a mixture of traditional hillbilly music, a little bit bluegrass, country type music, but they're also writing new songs, and they're all about my age. And I was like, this is really interesting. These like people my generation who have this kind of tradition, but also doing something new, and I liked the combination, and that became my next film, the Homemade Hillbilly Jam. So it always one film kind of led to the next, and then I was touring around the U.S. with Homemade Hillbilly Jam with my buddy Matt, my closest creative collaborator Matt Sweetwood. He's an American guy who lives here in Potsdam, and then we started shooting the next film, Forgetting Dad, about my father's amnesia. And because we just took equipment with us, we were invited to some film festivals, and then we visited some of my relatives and just started shooting the next film. So one film has kind of evolved into the next one, and it just keeps happening that way.
Yeah.
And the idea is kind of, I read a lot of newspapers and read a lot of stuff online, and just know various people, and then maybe I'm in a privileged position. I've been able to follow my own interests, and for them, I've had ideas that didn't go anywhere. I couldn't get money for them, but the projects that I have felt most passionately about, I've been able to make so far. So I think I'm pretty lucky in that regard. There was never a lot of money to do it, but that's not really my main motivation.
Yeah, can be luck, but like there is also this saying, I it doesn't come right now, but like luck is the intersection of like opportunity and hard work, or something like this. So it is kind of luck, but yeah, I think you're able to get to do these projects because of these, like you have a proven story that you can deliver in the story, and it's just an opportunity arises, and when they combine, many people's like, oh, that was lucky, but in the end,
Well, I think you have to have, if you really want to, if you seriously want to make a career out of being a filmmaker, you have to have really thick skin. You have to accept the fact that you're going to get rejected a lot of times. You're going to propose projects and people aren't going to take them. You're going to submit films to film festivals. They'll be turned down. That's just part of the deal. And, I would say with film festivals, for instance, my films get into maybe 10% of the festivals that we send them to. It can be really painful to get rejected from the ones where I really want to show the film. And it's also with the funding process. It's like that too. And I used to take it personally and felt like I was being rejected. But at some point I realized that I got to meet film festival programmers and TV station commissioning editors, and would just hear about their process of selecting projects. And at some point I realized that, what I wanted, the film that I had at that point was just not the right fit for what they needed at that point in time. But it doesn't mean that they don't like me. It just means that maybe we won't do business together until the next film or the one after that. So I've tried to adopt a long-term approach. And my attitude is that, I want to keep making films till I drop dead, basically. So I've got to concentrate on really thinking about what is it in life that really interests me, that I want to spend years, with these long films, they take several years to make. So it's like, what do I really want to spend several years working on every day? And because if it's something that you don't feel passionately about and you have to go to the editing room and you have to look at this footage every day and you don't like the people that you're looking at, that's really not very pleasant.
Yeah, I
so,
can imagine. I can
so,
imagine. Yeah, and then another question that I had that like I been on it like uh, some time ago. I had no idea how was the process is the funding process to get a film. Like I didn't know, but I don't know if you go through the same process. But many people like you establish what is in American an LLC or a UG here
mm,
just for like this is kind of a company. The film
mhm.
itself turns
Yeah,
itself into a company, and then you can basically do what startups do here. Like, oh, I give you 1% of the film, and then you get the returns. Like, how is it a funding process? How do you do
that's a
this?
very American way to do it.
Yeah.
In here, here in Germany, it usually doesn't work that way. Um, Also in the U.S., people also form LLCs a lot of times because they're afraid of if they get sued, then they can just close down the company and it won't affect their own personal assets. It's really a legal financial reason. Here, I have my own little one man production company, Our Man in Berlin, which I set up specifically to be able to apply to certain kinds of funding that I could not apply to as an individual person. It hasn't worked that well. In most cases, my big projects, I work together with established production companies that have a track record and that have their contacts and are just better at raising money than I am, because that's the part of filmmaking that I don't really like. I don't like producing. It's not something I enjoy doing, but I do have to. Um, I realized at some point that I have to pitch. I always have to pitch projects, and that's part of the deal. I have to write proposals and I have to pitch projects. And it's great if you can pitch together with a producer who's the money person, because then I can focus on the content. We go up on stage as a team, and I'm like the guy at the content guy, and the producer is the money guy, and that gives the financiers confidence because they want to see that it's not just a director who's going to get overwhelmed by all the money issues, which can be, they want to see that we're working together as a team, and they want to talk content with me and they want to talk business with my business partner. And that's when it works the best. So um, I would say, if like when you're starting out, it's really great to at least have one partner working with you and that you have different strengths, so that you can complement each other. And it's great if you have someone who's maybe a little more creative or a little more a good editor or a good camera person or something. The other person's a good business person and good at writing proposals and correspondence and likes to schmooze at parties and stuff and try to get funders, and because then it tends to work better.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you is about like the team, as you're saying, like, oh, it's good that you can focus on the creative side, and then you have like the producer who is like the money guy. And many people, like in the beginning, especially, you have to do everything
Mm.
yourself. But when you start to grow as a filmmaker, like, what are the people you think that it's like crucial that you can do the work that is not your creative input, so you can focus on what is your job, which is like telling the story.
Yeah, I think it's important if you can early on, no matter how small your team is, agree on what your goal is, what your common goal is, and then break it down into what steps need to be taken to get to that point. And then you'll see that some of them are really administrative, business typey things, raising money and organizing things, and some are actually the more maybe creative stuff, actually going out and shooting things. And then you start making checklists and stuff and go from there.
Yeah.
And the way to get things starting, for me, going to pitching events has been an important part of my career. And these are usually connected to some film festival. You can apply as, even if you're an unknown filmmaker, you still have a chance. You can apply. There are usually some slots that they're looking to discover new talent. And so you have to apply with some kind of a written proposal, usually through the festival websites. And then if you're selected, A lot of these festivals offer pitch workshops, which can be really good. You go for a day or two, and they have professional people who help train you so that you can pitch that your presentation's really good. They'll help you shape your story in a more concise way. They'll also help you with your pitch trailer because you always have to show some kind of footage. So that can be a really great experience to get your foot in the door at some kind of a big film festival and pitching event. I always recommend to people that look at the films that you really love that you've seen and study the credits at the end and look at who produced it, which companies were involved, who were the funders, and then it's really easy these days. Look at the website, the production company's website. Find out how you can get in touch with them. What else have they produced? Try to get a meeting with them so that you could pitch your idea. You would usually recommend trying to work through established production companies to get your foot in the door. And you can also look at the funders. But if you're an unknown person and going straight to a funder, that's a little tricky. It's usually better to go through a production company, and they have all their contacts, and they'll go that way.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. Like when you have the idea who you pitch to, so it's basically like you probably have more options, but production companies is the one that makes sense because everything you said, like they already have the contact and everything, so we will make the whole process from idea to bringing it to life easier. And another thing I wanted to ask you, talked about film festivals. When the film is done, like you finish editing and now it's time to show, what is there like any strategy or like you are selected picking any film festivals there is like, oh, I want to apply for this film festival because it's more related to the story, or it's like, oh no, I'm applying this because it's a big one and then it's like more prestige, or the other way around, like, oh, I'm gonna try to go for the small dogs first, like the less recognized, so I can get the foot in the door, and then because I'm accepted, maybe I can get accepted, like change a bit the visibility of the film.
Right.
Is there any strategy that you follow to send the films to festivals? Yeah. Which festivals?
Well, first you need to really honestly look at what you have and try to bring in some outside people who will give you an honest opinion about the film. Is this something that really could go to the Berlinale or Sundance or something like that, or is it something that's maybe not quite that good? But the general rule is it's the film festival world's kind of like a pyramid shaped, and that the top festivals are up here at the top. You'll have like Sundance, Berlinale, Cannes, Venice, Locarno, Toronto, festivals like that. And if you can get into them, they'll open all these doors, and all the festivals that are further down, like B festivals or smaller regional festivals, their programmers go to the big festivals, or they get the catalogs and they look for films there, and you'll start getting invitations automatically. But if you start further down the pyramid, you can't go back up. That's always so. If you don't even try to get into the really big ones, you're never going to get there. So basically, you have to be ready to get a lot of rejections, but it just takes like one really good one to say yes, and that can open a lot of doors for you.
Yeah, nice. But yeah, this is interesting because I guess for that to be able to achieve that, the budget that you need to send to these film festivals is also like the entrance fee, this kind. So do you already get like, okay, we're probably going to get rejected on the like top 2 tiers. So it's like, we're going to have to first try this, and like, it's, I don't know, the fees like 500 euros, it's there, but like we know that this is like an investment. Maybe we go, maybe not, but we have to try it. How is it?
You have to really think about you should budget some fees for marketing and expenses, which includes film festival fees. You have to really be kind of strategic. Certain, different festivals have different focuses. If you say like Locarno in Switzerland is a really great festival for emerging filmmakers, for like first and second time filmmakers. That's kind of their special profile. They're not probably going to show a film from someone my age because I'm already kind of out of that. Okay, that's their special focus. The different sections of the Berlinale have different focuses. If you're doing something a little more experimental, you'll be more maybe something for the forum section or forum expanded. That's something to think about. So you need to do your research. Look at these festivals. What types of films are they showing? Do you even fit maybe into that category? And then we haven't talked about sales agent, the roles of sales agents. These are people who are take films and they get them into film festivals and make television deals, which are still a big source of income for finished film. They are a little different than distributors. Distributors are the ones who get films into movie theaters, but the sales agent comes kind of before that. And if you can get a sales agent interested, they can get your film into a lot of festivals because they have all those connections. And I had that experience with my one film, Forgetting Dad, that I had a sales agent when we got invited to the documentary festival in Amsterdam, ITFA, which is the largest documentary festival in the world. We got accepted in the main competition. I already knew this agent. He had rejected 3 of my previous films, but we stayed in touch. I called him up right away when we got accepted, and he said, send me a link, and he watched it right away, and he said, I want it, and then he launched the film. So when it played in Amsterdam, he made sure that his buyers all saw the film, and that opened a lot of doors. I got invited to a lot of film festivals and stuff. So that's the best way
Yeah.
if you could do it. And again, sales agents, these are companies. They have websites. You can look at what types of films they have and be strategic. Don't if they specialize only in nature films and you made a music documentary, don't even waste these people's time. You have to do your homework. And almost everything's online these days. So it's just, look at some websites.
Yeah, like you just said, like almost everything is online, and it's funny because I'm like seeing right now that many people, they're trying to use the internet and like the influence to cut down some of these steps. There is this guy, Danny Griffiths. He's just doing his feature film, and it's all through like YouTube influence, and it's opening up this like whole new world of like, oh, I don't have to do all of these things to get the film made, because I can be like, for example, a content creator these days and talk about filmmaking, and just my audience can help me. Or there's also other people that have influence in this internet age, let's say, that you can find monies in other ways, So and this is again like you didn't have any of these back then, right? So you had to go to the traditional film way, right? I'm curious to get your thoughts about there is the traditional film like path, which is like you go to film school, you start like assisting, and then you become a more like start directing, and then you do the first film, and this natural progression, right? But these days you can also do a lot of the learning, not in a film school, but like in YouTube or something. Do you think like how, if you had to start over basically, like with all these resources you have today, do you think this traditional ways is still the way to go? Or like how is it the landscape today for someone who is starting out?
I don't think there's any one recipe that works for everyone. If you're a really charismatic person who's very active in social media and stuff, you might be able to just be you might be able to build your own audience very effectively and effortlessly. It might come very naturally to you, and you become a content creator, and YouTube is your place. That's great. That's just if you can do it, great. I mean, I've been through so many distribution workshops in the last years trying to teach old guys like me new tricks and trying to figure out how to get to our audience directly so that we can get rid of some of the gatekeepers in between who are like sometimes really standing in our way, or they're taking too much money that we think should be our money. So if you can find ways around gatekeepers and go directly to your audience, it's great. One big challenge, though, that we have to keep in mind is that there's an entire generation that has grown up expecting free content, and that makes it really difficult. There's a mentality in people that they shouldn't have to pay to see films or to listen to music, and that makes it very difficult as someone who's creating a creative person. It's like we have to get our money from someplace. So everyone's got to develop their own strategies for how you can do it. If you've got hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube, then you can monetize and you can make money directly by going directly to your viewers. If you don't go that path, you might need to still get money from TV stations or try to go that way, film funds and stuff like that. There's no right way. I'm always experimenting. I'm always trying to find new ways. With each film I've made has been produced in a slightly different way. So I still haven't. I guess I really haven't quite figured it out. I still think I always have in the back of my mind that there might be a better way to do things. So yeah, just try things, try everything, and hopefully something will stick.
Okay, perfect. So one last question, so we can wrap up. Well, someone of our listeners, maybe they're starting, they want to be like a documentary filmmaker as well. And regardless of the path, what would be like the first things to learn? Do you first try to focus on like, okay, I'm going to learn the camera stuff all first because then I can get it out of the way and focus on the story? Or you think like maybe you can start with the story and the camera you learn on the go? Is there any like from experience, like some kind of path, not in like film school or anything, but like what skills you should learn and like what people you should look for, like to progress as a filmmaker if you're just starting out?
I'd say the number one most important skill as a documentary filmmaker is to be a good listener. It really comes down to that. I sometimes think of myself as a professional listener because my experience has been that a lot of people I've filmed with are really appreciative that I'm there, and I just listen to the stories, listen to them, because a lot of people are just really lonely. They have something that they feel passionate about in life, and they have no one to talk to. Or everyone around him has already heard these stories over and over again. And if you come there as a new person and you really listen to people and ask questions that are relevant to them, then they'll open up for you. And in best case scenario, you bring along a friend who happens to be good with a camera, and then you can capture some magic. It's really tough if you just try to do everything yourself. I really encourage people to try to get at least one person to kind of team together. And because I've always had like a sound guy or a camera person with me who notices something that I don't notice. And maybe they're like, hey, why don't you ask him that question? And sometimes it's something really important that I just missed for some reason because they are observing the situation from a different perspective than I am. And it really comes down to teamwork. Whether you have a small team or a big team, I really encourage people to try to not do everything themselves.
Yeah, perfect. I think with that we wrap up this episode podcast. Thanks a lot for being here to share your knowledge. I myself learned a lot. I hope the listeners could get a lot of value out of this. And yeah, excited to see your next projects, your next films. And
Thanks.
see you in the next episode, in our events, our social media. We'll see you guys in the next one. And until then, keep creating.